Kumlan and Ablat Gemara. Today's daf is at Pegimel. The last thing we learned about was 4 occasions of the year when so many people bought meat, animals in order to eat meat, then you have to inform somebody if you sold the mother or the daughter on that particular day. And then we said, and these days also where it's if somebody pays you money and you accept it, even for one kazayas, and you couldn't find any other takers, that person owns part of the animal, and you need to shech the animal, and if anything happens to the animal, it's that person lost. Masha'in came. If you, what do you call it? The other times of the year, if he gives you money, if you have another taker, you can always return the person the money, and therefore he has no chaylik. If it gets lost, it's your loss. Says the Gemara, but why? If he gave you money, we know that money is not the only way you're kind an animal is through Mashiach, which is drawing the animal, Masira, changing the reins, or Hagbah lifting, but money is not, you're not kind. So even Rabbi Yechon holds that money is kind of mahatorah, but the Rabbanim Takana, they shouldn't say, we had more in Bava Metzia, they shouldn't say, oh, Shema Nisrach Chitecha Ba'aliyah. If there's a fire and your wheat is still sitting with me, I got my money. It's your problem. Or if it's a flood, it's your problem. No. We want to make sure that you're going to take care of it. So the Gemara wants to know, how is this person that gave money for one kazayis of this animal suddenly acquires the animal, and if anything happens to an animal, it's this guy's loss. Says the Gemara by the 2 dots about between the word Gemara and Mishnah, 3 lines into the word Gemara, about 15 lines at the bottom of the page. Says the Gemara, didn't make him Mashiach. How was he koine? He did make Mashiach. In a case we made Mashiach, so then what's the end? If he gave, in other times of the year, he gave the money, and as a loss of the animal, it's not his loss. But if he made a Mashiach, if he pulled the animal and you let him, then it should be a loss for him every time. The rest of the year, therefore, he makes the Meich's loss. But Mashach, why? The buyer made a Mashiach, he has a chelik in the animal, there's also should be his. So about 12 lines at the bottom of the page. So we want to know, why is it that 4 times a year, if he gave money, even for just the size of one kazayas, one olive of the animal, we said, that's it. You have a share in this animal. But how did it become his? We're talking about a special case. The owner said, you know what? I am going to tell somebody else, I want you to acquire this part of this animal on behalf of this person here. and even though the buyer wasn't present, maybe the buyer didn't make any kinyan, but I had a shliach without his knowledge be zeicha on his behalf, to acquire it on his behalf. And so these 4 occasions, this chusulai, it's a good, even though it's costing him money, it's a benefit because he needs to have meat for these 4 occasions, for shminat tzedus, for shvuis, and so on. There's that you could be zeicha even though the person's not there. You're making me pay money. How can you do that without even consulting me? The rest of the year, we don't know if you really want the meat or not. Therefore, the other person who acquired it on your behalf, it's not an acquisition because maybe it's actually bad for you. However, Rabbi Lozer, no, I'll give it a better answer. These 4 times, you know why he gets to share an animal. According to the Torah, money doesn't make your acquisition. It's the Rabbanan who said, we want you to make a Mashiach before you take over ownership. So, in these 4 occasions, we decide, no, we'll go back to the din of the Torah. Money makes the acquisition. Why did the rabbi say that, only when you make Mashiach, when you take it into your own possession? We're worried that the owner will say that if you gave him the money, he doesn't care anymore. The animal could be food, whatever it is, it can be, flooded. Who cares? This is your wheat that got burnt. Why should I risk myself to save your wheat? Therefore, made a rule. No, it's still your wheat until you actually give it to him. Next Mishnah, Yoim Echad. This din we say oisers b'nai you're not allowed to shecht the mother and its offspring. You're not allowed to shecht on the same day. What's considered a day? Yoim Echad Amar b'oisers b'nai Hayom Hoylech Achalayla. A normal Jewish day, night followed by day. And why we would think otherwise, as we'll see in the Gemara, is because the pasuk first talks about Hegdish, then the next pasuk about Kachim, then the next pasuk talks about the law of Isav Ezbenai. So we would have thought, well, we know about Kachim is different than other things, that Halayla Hoylech Achariyah, when it comes to at least the time of eating, the night follows the day. So maybe this din also is, it's a continuation. The night follows the day. He says, no. When it comes to Isav Ezbenai, since it has something to do with the Hegdish, it could be Chulin, Hegdish, anything. Therefore, it goes back to the normal din of what a day is, day followed by night. So generally, we call him Ben Zaymer. This is very rare that we call him by his full name.
We call him Rabbi either.
Yes, right. In fact, we had the Gemara in Sanhedrin the very end, the last page of the first page, it talks about that all these Shimons, actually they're all Shimon. Shimon ben Azai, Shimon ben Zayma, they're all called by the name, not by the first name, because they didn't have smicha, or they were young.
That's interesting why it calls the Rebbe.
Yeah, and Rebbe and Shimon, yeah. Amazing, yeah. And Ben Azai, the Ma'aser Bereishis, it says in creation, Yom Echad, V'nem B'Yisrael B'no Yom Echad, says both of them one day. Ma Yom Echad Amur B'Ma'aser Bereishis Yom Helach Hachalai, the ordinary day. Af Yom Echad Amur B'Yisrael B'no, the Torah uses the expression that one day Yom Helach Hachalai, a regular day like by us, day follows the night. We learned this is the dash, and even the Brisa call by the same name. Because the subject matter over there is all talking about kachi. It says Yerotze, that your karma should be accepted, and then it says Oishas Benoi. So therefore, I would have thought, we say the night it follows the day. So it says you can eat this for a day and a night, eat this for this carbon. So Yochel, I would have thought that was like Cain, the same thing here. Therefore it says here Yemechad. Where does he find the expression Yemechad? Not in the previous passage, but rather the Ma'aser Bereishis. Yemechad says the word Yemechad. Over there, day follows night. Day follows night. Rebbe says Yom Echad. You know the word Yom Echad means in the pasuk? Yom HaMe'uchad, the unique day. Toan Cruz. That is one day a year, or there's certain days a year, which is going to be 4, that you need to publicly announce Oiseh was Benoi. That the Oiseh was sold today, or the Benoi was sold today. From here we learn now about 4 occasions a year. If you sell an animal to your friend, you need to notify him and tell him the mother was just sold today as well, because I know everybody's buying meat today in order to shech. But if Revach, we had the mission, if he sold it 2 days before Yom Tov, then you don't have to tell him. The Rambam says a very interesting thing which people find hard to understand. He learns that Revach means if you sold to him in the morning, then you don't have to announce. If there's no Revach, you sold to him mamash a minute before the night, then you have to announce. And everyone else should be the other way around. If you sold in the morning, the chances are you're going to shech today. If you sold them a minute before the night, what are the chances you're going to shech today? Probably going to shech tomorrow on Yom Tov itself. And they find it very hard to understand the Rambam. Hadin Allah Oishev Benoi. Now goes the next mitzvah. So
if he sells 2 separate people,
yeah,
they can't shech it also.
No, yeah, Oishev Benoi makes no difference. The same person or 2 different people. Now, there's a number of mitzvahs that are covered in Masechet Chulin, and each one has their own pedic. So we just did the mitzvah. We'll do now. We did Oishes Benoi. Now we're going to do Kisei Hadam, the mitzvah of covering the blood. The mitzvah of Kisei Hadam, covering blood, only applies to a chaya, a deer, and a ram there, and or by a bird. That's it. That's the only place you have Kisei Hadam. Now, says the Mishnah. Kisei Hadam. Now, by Oishes Benoi, we said it makes no difference if it's a carbon hektish. It makes no difference except according to Rav Shimon. According to Rav Shimon, makes no difference if carbon. Makes no difference if Chulin. You had the same thing. Oishes Benoi cannot be slaughtered. But when it comes to Kisei Hadam, it does not apply to carbon kachim, only to Chulin. How do we know this in a minute? Kisei Hadam, noig chutzlad, the same style we had in the previous Mishnah. We say the same thing. Applies in Eretz chutzlad makes no difference where you are. It's a mitzvah on the person. Whether in the time of Midrash, not time of Midrash, it only applies to the Chulin, but not by Egdish. In other words, where do you have by Egdish? Not by an animal, but talking about a chatos ha'oif or oil ha'oif. There's no din of Kisei Hadam. Only by chayes and by birds. B'mezumen usha ein mezumen. Because by shaluach hakein the whole din is only. I'm going to learn about shaluach hakein as well later. Shaluach hakein the din and then gida nosha or the other way around. The shaluach hakein the din is only ki yikari lecha. If it by chance it happens to it, not if it's your own bird. But comes to here, it makes no difference if it's your own or if it's not your own. It makes absolutely no difference. Mezumen means that it grew in your own house, your own pet, your own animals. Or if it's Amazon from the outside. The noig bekoi, and we had this thing by koi, we had a big machlekes about a koi is. If a koi is a mixture of a behem and a chaya, and it's in relation to a suffix, so it's clear that this Mishnah follows, we have 3 opinions. This Mishnah follows the opinion that it says about that it's a mixture of a behem and a chaya, or it follows the opinion that's a very different answer, but halachically we don't know if its legal status is a behem or a chaya. So whether it requires kisei or not. Therefore, you cannot shecht it on Yom Tov. Why? Because maybe you have a mitzvah kisei Hadam, and on Yom Tov you cannot just do kisei Hadam, because on Yom Tov, kisei Hadam, you have to dig. So many malachas you're doing. You have to dig. You have to unearth, just chayfer, and you have to do this malach like 3 or 4 different malachas. But if you did shecht against our wishes, ein mechatzin is dome. We're not going to allow you to cover his blood because maybe it's a behemoth, and a behemoth is no kisei dam. So what right do you have to do this? It's not a mitzvah. It's not even a mitzvah. Even the muktzah part, which is a mitzvah, you're allowed. We're not going to allow you. Says the Gemara in Mikdash, my time alive. We're doing now the mitzvah of Kisei Adam. The Pegimel Beit. We just finished the Mishnah. So the Mishnah said that Kisei Adam, different than Oisel B'nai, only is relegated to Chulin and not to Kachim. So you want to ask Mikdash, my time alive. Why not by Hegdish? Why not a bird, a chatos, a oif, or an oilos oif? Why shouldn't they also have the mitzvah of Kisei Adam?
Praktisch correct. Where do you have offer in the West Mikdash? It's a marble floor.
You prepare. You prepare. And when you do the kaparas and every kippur, you prepare. They bring. So it says here, and we'll soon see that the problem is going to be the cover, the practicality, but for a different reason altogether. Mukdash, my time, why not? Ilema is the reason, Mishum de Rab Zayda, because the Rab Zayda said, what Rab Zayda said, we already had it on a number of occasions. The Rab Zayda said, Hashoichet Tzarishit offer. No, we didn't have it. The next Rab Zayda. Hashoichet Tzarishit offer Lamata, you need to have sand. Mitzvah Kisadam is like a sandwich. You have sand underneath the blood and then sand above. How do you know that? Because it says, V'shafach ez dama, you pour out the blood, V'kiso, and you should cover it. Bit offer. You should cover it. What do you mean bit offer? Cover it with sand. Offer bit offer, as if it's inside the sand. It has to be you cover it, but it has to be inside. So it has to be underneath, and it has to be above. Here's impossible. On the Mizbeach, it's impossible. Because when do you have by Mizbeach Kisadam? Only by Chatos Oif and Oilos Oif. You do the Malika, right? You do it right by the corner of the Mizbeach, and the blood has to be squirted directly on the Mizbeach. So where's the underneath? That means you're going to have to put sand on the wall of the Mizbeach. The blood goes on top of that, and then you cover it. That's a problem. Why is that a problem? I'm going to explain. Practically speaking. What you do? You put sand there, and you said, I'll leave it there. That means you're adding to the dimensions of the Mizbeach. You're adding, if you're going to leave it there, like we're having more sukkah in the beginning. If you put sand there, and you say, I want it to be oil and blood, it becomes part of that, whatever that thing is. So l'chaydi becomes part of the beach. And what's wrong with that? Uksiv, David Melech told Shlomo Melech, Hakol b'ksav miyad Hashem, that everything that I have is all written down. This whole configuration of the Beis Hamikdash. And every time there's something added, they always ask, but how does it fit into Hakol b'ksav miyad Hashem? Either like his kalam is given to me to understand. You can't add to the fixtures of the Beis Hamikdash. Loy levatle. Okay, so why mevatle? Then. That means it says in the pasuk you have to sprinkle the blood on the mizbeach itself, but it's not. It's going on sand because this sand you're going to remove, so it's not part of the mizbeach. It's a chatzitza. So you okay. So you cannot put the sand beneath, but definitely you can cover it on top.
On the upper surface.
No. After you sprinkle the blood, put sand on top of that. Okay, so ideally we want you to have sand beneath and sand above. But if you can't do the sand beneath, have sand above. And how do we know that's good enough? You just said you have to have sand on both sides. So more ask the question. Didn't we learn? Rabbi Yonasan ben Yosef says, if you shechter a chaya first of the blood underneath, it's landing on the ground, so you have offer on the bottom. But then you shechted on a behemoth, which there is no requirement for kisadam. So now potter, because you're going to put sand on top. The sand is not going to sit on top of the blood of the chay, also on top of the blood of the behemoth. That's a chatzitza, so you're not doing anything. So then you have potter, melachasas. But both the way around, behemoth, in other words, the sand on top is mamish li'ikub. You need to have the sand on top of the blood. But what if the other way around? That first you shafted the behemoth, and then chaya. Now, underneath the chaya is the blood of the behemoth. So there's a chatzitza between the sand on the bottom and the behemoth. Yet chaya l'chasas, you have to cover it. L'chayda, what does she clear from here? You see clearly from here that the sand on the bottom is not makiv. If you can't, you can't. If you could, you could. Says the Gemara, no. Kid Rab Zayda, this follows the rule of Rab Zayda, The Zayda said a rule. This is what we had many times. Anything which, we had a thing is that you have to have 60, when you donate menachas and the shrainim, you shouldn't have more than 60 in a pot, because then you can stir the oil. Whether you put 60 measures of oil on your one, whatever, then you can stir. But if it's 61, you have to have 2 pots. So the Gemara asks, but the din is you don't even have to stir. You don't have to stir. If you didn't stir, it's still kosher. So why can't you have a 61 shrainim pot? And the Gemara answers, because Zayd answers, this is the rule. The Torah wants you to stir. But as long as you're able to stir, ain't bila makel's boy. But if it's not a roll then ain't bila makel's boy. Right, then bila makev. But if it's not possible, then bila is makev. Actually, you talk about what's the svor over here. In Achrein, I have a hard time understanding this rule, because if you follow this rule, then, and Teisha says in a few places it's a svara. If you follow this rule, then there's no halachas anymore. Every halacha the Torah makes a requirement. You have to write a get lishma. If you could have written lishma, then where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line? So one place Teisha says is this is din only by kachim. But the truth of the matter is, in halacha, we use this rule a number of times. The big argument in Rashi and Teisha and Bracha is about if you stop in the middle of Shmoneh, if you're davening quiet Shmoneh, should you stop and listen to Kedusha or not? Is it considered a hefsek or not? Famously, Rashi, if Eidim can write down their Eidos on a piece of paper and throw into Bezin, Rashi says that's that's Rashi says that you cannot, because api. And you have to be dafka edim and not through ksav. And Teisha says, Rabbein Tam says, since they could have walked into Bezin and they could have given the edus, it's good enough. It's only if you're an ilim. It's only if you're if you're mute, and then it's not rollabila. And the Achreim have a hard time understanding. So what's the rule? When do you call rollabila? When do you say no? You have to have a requirement, but you have to follow the rules. And I've never seen a mamish a good rule that tells us everywhere navigate your way. So I want to say wherever we find it a shayna machlekes, that's the only time we say kol rola, and everywhere else we don't say it. Anyway, why don't we just take away, scrape off the blood of the animal? We take away the blood of the animal and then do it. Didn't we learn? Any blood that's spurted out or it's on a knife, also have to cover it. Well, it's on the knife. You scrape it off. Alma the gorer mechasle. No hachnamir to namenigu nechasle. So scrape it off and cover it like the blood on mizbeach. Take the blood off and cover it. So the Gemara says, "Ibe kachim b'rechanam." You're right. Kachim mizbeach, for example, chatas oif and oilus oif. You're right. Take the blood off the mizbeach, and you could do kisei adam, and maybe you have to do kisei adam. Now we're saying chatas oif because chatas oif is called a shchituruya. Remember, we had a whole discussion in the last few days. You need shchituruya. Why? Because this kachim is going to be eaten by kohanim, so the shchit is effective. When it comes to oilus oif, we had a machlekes whether it's shchituruya or not, because who eats the oilus oif? Only the mizbeach. Is that considered eating or not? Is it shchituruya or not shchituruya? But chatas oif definitely. Kohen will eat from it. So it's a chituruya, so you chayiv kisei adam. Because if it's not a chituruya, you're not chayiv kisei adam. But chayiv definitely chayiv kisei adam. So why don't you take a scrape of the blood and do kisei adam? Because you're right. Hachinami. Hachamai b'kotche bedek abayis. Kotche bedek abayis. Because kotche bedek abayis, somebody donated to the base of midrash for maintenance. What happens is if you shecht it, it's osur bahana. And with osur bahana, then what did the shchita achieve? Nothing. And the shchita achieves nothing. That's called a shchita she'eino ruya. It's not a shchita, and therefore you're not chayiv kisei adam. But even then, the lifrikinu, let us redeem it, the lichsinu, and then cover it. No, redeem it, it becomes chulin, pay the money over to the Beis HaMikdash, then become chulin, you chayiv kisei adam. Pesach already asks, why am I to redeem it? If it's unbelievable, because there's another case in Shabbos says all the way around. Pesach asks right here, if there's no mitzvah to kisei adam, where do you find that you have to put yourself into a matzav, into a situation that you can be chayiv a mitzvah? And was asking a question. Go redeem it so that you could do the mitzvah kisei adam. What do I have to redeem it for? Right now I'm potter from kisei adam, so you potter. Traces in Shabbos says that we learn out over there that and he said we learn from Saita by Moshe Rabbeinu. That why do you want to learn Yisrael in order to do kilechol b'piriya? He did it in order to be able to do mitzvahs. So Traces in Shabbos says if we learn from the Gemara Saita that yes, there is an inyan to go put yourself to take. It's interesting to bring this mother right here, but right here, The Gemara is saying, let him go ahead and redeem it and do the mitzvah adam as if there's some kind of an Indian in it.
So why do we have?
Look at top line takes it. Tema. I don't know you have to put yourself in that situation to go ahead and do it. So Taisha says that's not really the question. The question maybe is that since you're going to redeem it anyway, because right now you can't do anything with it, so therefore maybe the mafreya is considered a shchituri because you're going to redeem it anyway. Not today, tomorrow. What's the heck you going to do with it? He says you're going to redeem it. So then because that's about not right now. So then maybe that's what it mean. But partial shot the Gemara is go ahead and do it. Like Rashi says, as if there's some kind of an Indian that you have to go ahead and put yourself in a moment. Yeah.
I'm just saying, but we have the same Indian, but since it's not.
That's what Tosha is talking about.
Nobody says you have to wear a four-cornered garment.
Rabbanan said that. That's what Tosha says. You have to put yourself in a situation of wearing a four-cornered garment so you can get to the midst of tzitzis ma'atayla.
Midairaisa, if you don't have a four-cornered garment, apart from tzitzis.
Anyway, interesting. So this could be a mocker. They don't bring this Gemara as a mocker, but it should. Anyway, let's go back to the Gemara. The Gemara, you know why we don't redeem it? Because you can't. Remember, you had a machlekes as well. Because be'inan, you need hamoda v'haracha. We need that if you want to redeem something, the animal has to literally. We had a machlekes, which means literally not. It has to be able to stand up. But you shechted already. How can the animal stand up and then assess it? And therefore, you cannot be poida kachim after he's dead because of this thing. It says it's not shaykh. Come on, I don't know who we follow here. If Ramei Adomer said he said that in every single case there is shaykh to have this din of Hamad Baruch, whether it's kachim mizbeach and there has a defect, or whether it's kachim bedek abayis. He's the one who holds that shchita she'ein ruya shmo shchita. He holds that shchita she'ein ruya shechta turn the bitreif that you are high to do kisedam. So he holds even shchita she'ein ruya. You still have to do kisedam. So Taka would have to do kisedam in kachim bedek abayis. Taka shchita she'ein ruya because also who cares? You have a mitzvah kisedam. So it can't be talking about a kontra meir. Navas ikarab Shimon. He holds shchita she'ein ruya lo shmo shchita. He holds that shchita is not shchita, right? That's what you're saying. So therefore, and you're asking me a question. Why don't we redeem it? He says, he says, it could. He says that not everything was included in haracha, and therefore you could, because he holds that only kachim kabbonis is included in the din v'hemid. Mashenke, when it comes to kachim bedek abayis, you don't have to be able to stand up. No, he could redeem it. So what's going on here? Rabbi Yosef, Rebbe, and so he can't be talking about kachim bedek abayis. No. This is Rebbe, and Rebbe, we have this a number of times. He follows one opinion according to one Tana, and the other matter he holds like the other Tana. Rebbe v'nosel aliba Tanoi. He follows Tanoi. B'shchita shenuru holds like Reb Shimon that it's that's not a shchita v'hamarocha. So like Rameir. And they holds like both of them, and so on. So when you have another answer, a few answers. Another answer is cool Reb Shimon. It's all Reb Shimon. It's all Reb Shimon, the shiny, and that's why he puts a kisadam because it's shchita shenuruya. The shiny hocha damakra, but if Reb Shimon l'chayli can redeem it, and therefore if you redeem it, it becomes retrospectively shchita. Right? It's no longer a bedek bias that becomes also no, it becomes a shchita. Damakra is shafach. It says in the pasuk, first you pour out the blood, and the first thing you do after you're pouring out the blood is to cover it. Here you need to do one more step in between. You have to redeem it. Oh, what it is, you pour out the blood and then cover it. And pediya, then kisui. Here's one more step, right? Bedekabayis shechted it. It's asmanot shchita. Then you have to redeem it. Sounds chulin, respectively good shchita, and then you're going to go ahead and do kisui. There's no such thing. Now that you introduce this idea, we'll go back to we talk. Who said we're talking about bedekabayis? We're talking about kachim. And you ask the question, why by kachim there's no kisei adam? And you ask, can you scrape the blood off the mizbeach? It would be kisei adam, and that's how we came to the answer. We're talking about bedek abayis. I'll tell you right. You know why? Even kachim. I feel tame kachim mizbeach. All you have is two steps: the blood and then covering it. Here you have to pour out the blood and then scrape it off the mizbeach, and then you have to cover it. You can't have an extra step. Third answer. Ma'abar Rabashi says, Makro, it says in the pasuk that it says if you trap a chaya, or this is the midst of kisadam is, it says chaya or oif. So we can compare an oif to a chaya. Ma chaya ain't a koder, just like a chaya cannot be a carbon. Af oif ain't a koder. To my birds, that and it does not become what do you call it? There's not shaykh to kabbanis, and therefore by carbon there's no kisadam. What are you talking about? Ima chaye by chaye, no chaye is ever suitable to the mizbeach. She'em mina kodesh, no animal is ever suitable to the mizbeach. But af oiv she'em mina kodesh, maybe by birds also. Those birds that does not go on the mizbeach, there's no mitzvah kisadam. They're like chaye. Oh, but oitzi toile b'neyoyna she'et mina kodesh. What about those birds that do go on the mizbeach? Maybe those birds, the doves and all that, the turtle doves, maybe they taka do have the mitzvah of kisadam because they're not similar to a chaya. The Gemara said, no, well, dashin loy no kechaya. Ma chaya loy chilaktaba. By chaya, we don't make a difference one chaya another. All chayas, there's not shaykh to kabbanis. No, there's no mitzvah of kisadam by chayas of a carbon. Is af oif like the chalabar. Saying by a bird, I don't care if it goes in back or not. There's no kisadam by kachim. We have a rule that chaye b'chal behemel is samani. We learned before that a chaye. How do you know that a chaye is kosher? Has kosher samani because it says by behema. A chaye is included. Remember, we had all the different dinim. You learn behema from chaye from behema. The aim of why do we say also nami behema b'chal chaye lekisi? If you just like if you're learning a chaya has to have these two kosher signs in order to be able to be eaten, and once you have them, you can eat. Why don't you do it the other way around? That a behemoth, just like a chaya requires kisedam, behemoth also requires kisedam. Amalei said to him, Makro, regarding you, it says the pasuk, Ala odes tishbechenu kamayim. What do you do with the blood of a behemoth? Pour it out like water. So the dam of a behemoth is like water. Water you have to cover? No. So dam also mayin leboy kisa, v'ainam leboy kisi. So like blood, water you don't cover, neither you cover the blood. Says the Gemara, El Miatav, so yad bi leboy. So it should be a mikveh. If you get a lot of blood from an animal, use it as a mikveh because it's like mayim. Halachically it's water. The Gemara says, no, Amakra, says the pasuk, Ach mayan uboy mikveh mayim yi'etor. It says mayan uboy mikveh mayim. It says clearly only real mayim can be a mikveh toir. Only water, nothing else. Not something which is like water, not dam. Who said? Maybe it's coming to exclude all other 7 liquids. Coming to all other liquids, wine, milk, but not blood. With the Torah clearly, we just learned, the Torah clearly says, Torah compares blood to water. So maybe blood is different. We have twice the Torah emphasizes mine. It says in the pasuk, mayin, uboy mayim. It says achmayin uboy mikveh mayim because it says the word mayim and it goes on all the words mayin and boy. So it's like twice it says mayin. But maybe maybe both of them are coming to exclude shamashkin. It says both mayins. What do you mean? Two kinds of shamashkin. How? In other words, the din by mikveh is you don't have 40 saw and you only have mayin shuvin. You put it on the ground, and then if the water then goes through the earth or the ground and it joins the mikveh, it becomes the water becomes now like nizra becomes what do you call it? As if it's not shuvin anymore. The ground made it uy shuvin. So maybe it's coming to tell you, but if you did that with wine, you did that with milk, it doesn't work that way. That's one pasuk. That's zeichlin. And the other pasuk is if you have a 40 saw of milk, a 40 saw of wine, mechunosin in one gathered in one place, you also can't use it. So both mayims need to negate the different kinds of mashkin. How do you know blood with the Torah clearly says it's like water? You can't use it as a mikveh. So you want to close some utiksiv. It says mayin boy. The pasuk says ach mayin uboy umikveh mayim yi'etor. So it says because you have the word mayin goes on 3 things: on mayin, on boy, and mikveh. 3 times mayin. What's the third mayin for? To tell you what, only that blood doesn't count. Tell them what we learned. It says the pasuk right in the beginning of this din of kisadam. It says ish that asher yotzu tzayid, that you go ahead and you trap something. Sounds like it's like by a bird kiyukari, not if it's your own animal. Asher yotzu ainli el asher yotzu nitzoy devoid milei minayin. I know if you happen your own animals and you own a bird and you shechted. I know you meet kisadam. Only tzayid, only if you go out there in the wilderness, just like shluch kain out there. If you're going out there trying to go them, your own domestic little birds. Tamalema, it says the pasuk tzayid. It says pasuk tzayid mikol mokum. It says yotzud. Then it says tzayid. It's captured. I don't care if it's captured because of you or it's in your house already captured a long time ago. Imke matam lem yotzud. So why is the Torah such a yotzud? The Torah now will teach you a little derech. Lam the Torah derech. The Torah wants to teach you how to be a mensch. What do you mean how to be a mensch? How a person should behave themselves. Don't be don't be what's the word? Glutton. Sorry? Glutton or spend money that you don't have. It's more like a glutton is a person like to eat. Spend money you don't have. So a person should not eat meat just the whole time, only when you prepare yourself for it. Now we can more explain what that means. Talk about it, and we learn. When the Eibishter will make you broaden you, had more Chulin and Daf Zayin there about Machlek B'Shor B'Kiva, if they were able to eat basa taiba in the midbar, and or they only started eating basa taiba when they came to Israel, and in the midbar they only ate korban shlamim. So it says or another opinion is that in the midbar they did the chira, they were able to eat chulin, but they didn't have to shecht. They only shechted when they came to Israel. So it says about the Yachar, and then it says, Martin, you said, right? You want to eat meat because it's a taiva. Don't eat meat unless you really want to. Really have desire. I would have thought, so go ahead and buy meat whenever you want. If there's a vachta, it said a pasuk, if there's a vachta, you should shech and korcha that what you should shech it. What do you call it? From what you have, not go out on the street and buy meat in the butcher shop. You should, if you have it, you have it. So okay, I like meat. I should shecht my entire flock. You don't have to eat everything that you have. Leave some. This is the rule. Now, the Gemara says was so rich that he gave 10,000 sheep as meiser in a year. And yet, look at he's the one who's giving advice on how a person should live modestly. He says, if somebody only has a mana, which is a very small amount, should take as a side dish, a liter of vegetables. When you have a bit more, a liter of fish. And chamishim mana meat. Rashi says in those times fish was cheaper than meat. Remember, Rashi Chumash says that fish is a delicacy even more than meat. But here, in those times, the fish was cheaper. Then you have 100 mana, then every day you can have hot food. What about the other ones? Can they ever have hot food? They can have it, Erev Shabbos to Erev Shabbos. You should listen to the wise words of the old person. Just can finish. Rabbi Yechon called Rab Abba as a term of endearment. We had Machlekes by Shmuel. He was from a very healthy family. He can eat meat once a week, and meat gives you protein, but that's for him good enough. We're out of my line. We're poor, but nevertheless we need our meat. You have only 1 cent in your thing. Go buy your meat. By us, you say you have to have a prut in your pocket. I say you have nothing in your pocket. Loving, borrow money. But and go ahead and eat meat. It's so important to eat meat. Okay, well, I think